This week in this module we're studying existential theory, and there's some debate about whether the theory is best characterized as a philosophy or a theory. One of the issues that have led us to this debate within our profession is that existential theory is not technique oriented or technique driven. There's not a well-defined set of techniques. Rather, it is based on philosophical views about the essential nature of human existence. What is the essential nature of human existence? And counselors, therapists utilizing this theory as a framework. They're free to draw techniques from many, many other orientations, but they do have assumptions and attitudes that govern how the techniques that their process for choosing techniques. The view of human nature from the existential point of view could be best characterized as realistically optimistic. They view people as struggling with universal concerns, and the universal concerns are the concerns of death, freedom, isolation, and meaning. And anxiety can cause unhappiness and despair, and it's typically, we're going to talk more about how anxiety might arise. Kierkegaard, the grandfather, is considered the grandfather of existentialism. And Nietzsche emphasized the importance of human subjectivity. Existentialism has been around for a long, long time. That focus on the meaning of existence, meaning of life, our choice and freedom. These pieces, this will to power, like Nietzsche, this is a focus for people. That existential question of humanity, what does it mean? How do we relate? These are questions that humans have always asked. For counseling theorists, who brought existentialism, the philosophy of existential philosophy, into counseling or psychology? It would be Viktor Frankl and Rollo May and Irvin Yalom. They focused all on dealing with issues of anxiety, power, freedom, developing identity. We're going to talk more about Frankl in a minute too. For those of you who learn best by listening, it might be helpful to you to also listen to this podcast that can be downloaded at the link included. It is a social work podcast, and we are counselors. However, within this podcast, the narrator uses our textbook, so that's pretty helpful. Some of that information may be helpful to you. We've talked about phenomenology before because you found this in Adlerian theory. And phenomenology is the focus on the lived experience, that subjective human experiencing of life and a relationship. So that lived experience is the core to the philosophical underpinnings of this theory. So what are the approaches to existentialism? There are a number of different approaches. There's dynamic, humanistic, transpersonal. All have a slightly different focus. But at the core, the question is still that question of meaning, existence, and relationship. Existentialism deals with dynamic or ever-changing transitions that individuals encounter as you emerge, evolve, and become. Like life. It deals with the questions of life and humanity, and how do we relate, and what is the meaning? What are the answers to these questions? Who will I be? Who am I? Where do I come from, and what is my contribution? That the importance of time is emphasized with the focus really on the present and understanding self in the world. What are the key concepts for existentialism? Being in the world, being present and attentive and aware. The four ways of being, time and being, anxiety, living and dying, freedom, responsibility and choice, isolation, meaning and meaninglessness, and striving for authenticity. These are all key concepts, but if you go right back to our opening slides, you'll see that these pieces were already there. The anxiety, freedom, isolation, relationship, meaningfulness. From where do we find meaning, and that responsibility and choice. Being in the world. What do we mean by being in the world? There are four ways of being. The biological world or environment is one piece. The with world, or the area of human relationships. The own world, relationship one has with oneself. And then the beliefs about the world. So these things are like your actual physical world around you. Like, what is the relationship there? What is your relationship with other humans? What's your relationship and sense of self? How are you connected to self and reflecting on self? And then how do you view those connections about your spiritual connections, your connections to something higher? Rollo May gives a pretty interesting example. he's focused on this dream of an illegitimate child of a prostitute. So this woman, she has a dream. She's an illegitimate child of a prostitute. And she says, then she's explaining it to Rolla May. I remember walking that day under the elevated tracks in a slum area and feeling the thought, I am an illegitimate. I recall the sweat pouring forth in my anguish and trying to accept that fact. And later that night, I woke up and it came to me this way. I accept the fact that I am an illegitimate child. But I am not a child anymore, so it is I am illegitimate. But that is not so either, as I was born illegitimate. But then what is left? What is left is this, I am. This act of contact and acceptance with I am, once gotten hold of, gave me what I think was for the first time the experience of since I am, I have the right to be. So this individual first conceptualized herself as being, I am an illegitimate. That was a concern to her. But then she said, well, no, I'm an illegitimate child. So really I am a child. But no, she's not a child anymore. And illegitimate was limiting. It's not it. So I was born illegitimate. But what's left, when you take these pieces away, what's left, and what was left for her was that I am. And that act of, since I am, I have the right to be. That sense of worth through self. Time and being. This is another critical concept for the existential theory. The focus is on the future, past and present, but the individual is viewed as being in the process of self-actualizing and moving into an intermediate future. So every individual, we're in that process of self-actualization. We're embedded in that process, engaged in that process. And the information about the past, that's used to help us better understand history and development. Anxiety. When we think about anxiety within existential theory, we conceptualize it as two forms of anxiety. Normal anxiety, which is appropriate to whatever situation the client is in, is not usually repressed, and it provides an opportunity to confront dilemmas. And then there's neurotic anxiety, which is blown out of proportion. It's inappropriate, and it's destructive to the success of the individual. Other critical concepts are living and dying. Now, existentialists view death as inevitable, and the awareness of death, thinking about death as inevitable, the awareness of death should not cause dread, but should inspire us all to live a creative, full life. So death is not a threat, it's not something hanging over us, but it is an urging for us to live our lives fully and take advantage of each opportunity to do something meaningful. The concepts of freedom, responsibility, and choice. What we know is that in the pursuit of freedom, individuals are responsible for their own world, their life plans, and their choices. This is the perception of the existential theorist. These concepts, they view these concepts, freedom, responsibility, and choice, as being highly interrelated. So you're free to choose the ways in which you will be responsible for leading your life, and to choose which values are significant to you. When May would discuss freedom, that concept of being willing turned responsibility into action. So you've got two concepts of being willing, wishing and deciding. And psychological problems may view that psychological problems arose when there's an inability to wish or to act on decisions. You must have some wishes, and you must be willing to make some choices to move forward and take action. Isolation and loving are also critical pieces. The existential isolation, that refers to being separated from the world, being totally alone, and feeling nothingness. Loving relationships overcome that sense of existential isolation. They lead to that I-thou, that connection. And meaningfulness and meaninglessness. Out of our will to love and live and connect, we arrive at meaning in our lives. We find meaning in our world by being fully aware of ourselves. You see how these pieces fit together when we go back to those 4 ways of being? That connection to the larger world, the connection to others in the world, and then that connection to self. Meaning is implicit in discovering ourselves and our awareness of others. And through this meaning, what we do is we strive for authenticity. It's a central genuineness and awareness of being. Authentic persons are grounded, honest, compassionate. And you're true to your values and goals. True to the values and goals that you hold in that level of authenticity. The therapeutic relationship, that's core to the existential connection. Remember, we were talking about the ways of being, that connection to others and the definition of meaning and sense of connection to the world and the larger world, like the spiritual world around you, that those relationships translate to the importance of a strong relationship between the counselor and the client. The counselor is viewed as a guide to the counselee's journey of self-discovery. So what the counselor is intending to do is to help that client build those better relationships, that connection to self, so that then that connection to self can be a basis to that much larger connection to the world and other humans around you. Components of therapeutic relationship include therapeutic love, the loving friendship. You strive to be genuine and to develop a genuine caring encounter that does not stifle your client's growth. The counselor remains authentic to self and authentic to the needs of self and client too. Resistance occurs, the perception of existential theory, resistance occurs when the client does not take responsibility, is alienated, or is not aware of feelings. Being inauthentic leads to that resistance. It's a form of resistance as well. So it's very, very critical that we establish as counselors as authentic relationships. Transference. Too great a focus on transference interferes with the authentic relationship. So transference is viewed for existential theorists as being a way to kind of act out relationship issues with others. So you got to have that core authentic relationship between the client and the counselor. And within that relationship, sometimes transference will reveal other relationship issues that are present in the client's broader life. But if transference is the main focus, it can interfere with developing that truly authentic relationship. The counselor's got to be present and involved with clients for the therapeutic process to work. And self-disclosure may at times be appropriate to help the clients fully develop their own sense of authenticity. And a counselor utilizing existential theory as the framework for practice will explore existential themes: death, freedom, responsibility. There are a lot of intervention strategies that could be included. These wouldn't be viewed as techniques, more so. They're viewed as strategies: telling the story, being in the moment, trying to focus the client on being aware of their central awareness of being, helping the client take responsibility, using some dream work, sometimes utilized, confronting anxiety, and sustaining changes in being. The existential relationship is the primary therapeutic intervention, okay? So techniques or interventions, really the primary focus is on that relationship, the relationship. The client's not met with pity or sympathy, and the counselor has to be very, very present on the sharp edge of existence. Being not only implies presence, but it also restrains the counselor's own thoughts and feelings when she or he participates in the client's world. The phases of counseling include an initial, a middle, and a final phase. Initially, you're assisting the client to identify and clarify assumptions about the world, defining questions, how they define the world, and helping them define some questions about how they perceive and make sense of their existence. In the middle phase, the clients are really examining the source and authority of their present value system to help them develop a much more clear sense of purpose and meaning. And in the final phase, you're encouraging and helping the client take what they're learning about themselves and put it into action for purposeful existence. There are some limitations for existentialism. It is a subjective approach to a world that is sometimes viewed as a more objective world. It relies on verbal exchange and authenticity. So it doesn't always consider how you would work with clients who are withdrawn or avoiding. And it lacks a more guiding framework for plan of practice, right? And there's a lack of scientific exploration to validate the ideas. There's some tests that measure existential conflict, and here are some of the purpose of life tests. There's some scales about the avoidance of confrontation of death, etc. The life regard index and the experienced levels of emptiness and existential concern. There are some tests out there that can be utilized. You see counselors using them fairly infrequently, though. There's been no real efficacy studies on the success or efficacy of existential theory, the effectiveness. The lack of research on the theory adds to the claim it's more of a philosophy rather than a specific theory. As in terms of multicultural considerations, though, it has been championed as one of the most ethnoculturally sensitive approaches because it's focused on the individual experience and self-discovery, and it certainly has the potential to be very multiculturally and gender sensitive since it works with the individual right where he or she is. It celebrates individual uniqueness. Trask and Norcross do a little disagree. They say, only in existentialism and the movies do people possess unlimited freedom to construct their own meanings and execute balanced choices. So it's not for everybody, but there are elements of existentialism that certainly apply to the search for meaning that many of your clients will engage in, and that you may help steward them through that process as a counselor.